so far and associated with a number of risks. As we all know that we are marking scripts of over 1 million candidates, and I also need to qualify, it wouldn't mean that the over 1 million candidates, each one of them would have written all papers for the 6 subjects. So some of them would have written for fewer subjects, but of course the volumes were much bigger than we handled before. We had to start preparing this from March, April, and I think it has shown that our preparation has paid a lot of dividends. I must say that given the fact that we had to handle this assignment within the context of COVID-19, in the visits that I've had to the 177 marking centers, the observation made by both center managers, deputy center managers, chief markers, internal moderators, were that this was the most demanding task. And some of them have been doing this work for over 10 years, but we are eternally grateful to them that this task has been delivered successfully. I also need to convey our greatest appreciation and thanks to the Minister, Deputy Minister, MECs and provincial heads of department, but also heads of exams who did an excellent job of delivering this assignment ahead of schedule, by the way. The time to finish marking, or the date for finishing marking, is the 22nd. Over 90% of our marking centers have completely closed. You'll see from the presentations that are going to be made in a few minutes from now. Let me also convey our profound appreciation and thanks to every marker. Marking is a voluntary task. People apply and they are considered based on their experience, and they get appointed to do this work. And I want the media, the public, and our nation to know that these men and women offered to risk their health, to risk their life, to carry out this important national task. For me, it's one of the highest acts of patriotism that could be highlighted in the basic education sector. And it's for that reason that even some of them, although we don't encourage it, even though they didn't feel well, they felt obliged, given their sense of patriotism in doing this work. And I know that some people would say there is a token of appreciation that you make available to them. If you take that into account, it will never be able to afford them to recover their health, some of them. It won't afford them actually even to recover their lives. Now, if you compare the sacrifices that they are making and the token of appreciation that they get after marking, really the two are not comparable. And therefore want to say thank you very much to each and every marker. We regret those who are fallen in the course of carrying out this exercise. Both markers and officials, the sector has suffered a number of fatalities during the course of this exercise. We've lost also chief markers, internal moderators, some at national level, some at provincial level. And this is the expertise, skills and competencies and experience that you acquire over many years. So it will take some time for the sector to replace these men and women. But we are eternally grateful to each and every marker. I saw them working tirelessly, starting early in the morning, some 7 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening, some 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the evening, in some instances going even beyond the stipulated time, which is the cutoff time for marking in our centers. The good news is that we've had very little or no disruption because of load shedding, and credit goes to ESCOM, even though as citizens we feel very unhappy with load shedding and so on. I must say that with basic education we were really not affected. Maybe the impact is minimal. It's in terms of capturing marks, and I'm sure Mrs. Okubanjo will also give us progress in terms of the marks that have been captured so far. As I've said, the assignment is almost completed ahead of schedule, 3 to 4 days ahead of schedule, which gives us enough time now to capture the marks of each learner. And I'm also heading the standardization process, which started yesterday. We are starting to prepare for standardization, getting qualitative inputs from each of the 9 provinces in all the subjects and papers that have been written, because that is very important. And standardization, it's about looking at how the paper presented itself to learners. Now that marking has happened, we now know how learners have encountered each of the papers, and we also have curriculum experts who will evaluate that against the curriculum objectives, whether each paper has been set in line with curriculum objectives. Let me also conclude by thanking the exam line functions, both at national and provincial level. And I must say, it has also suffered some casualties. There are officials in exams, and I'm sure we know already, that got infected with COVID-19. And even at provincial level, they are operating with less than the full complement of the staff that should be in those offices. But we are providing support and encouragement throughout. In our visits to marking centers, the main purpose was to ensure that health and safety requirements are observed, and we elevated that to the highest level to be the apex of priorities. And we think that that has worked, and we're impressed. Every step of the way, every marking center, we found them complying, over 100% compliance with safety and health requirements. So without any waste of time, I'm going to invite Mrs. Priscilla Okubanjo to take us through the technical report.
Thank you, DG. This is special sanitization, I would say. I'm going to take you through the technical report and provide an update on the marking of the combined 2020 November examinations. And today I'll give you progress with regards to how far we have gone in marking. And then I'll provide you with some information in terms of the processes to come, like mark capturing and our preparation for finalization and release. Now, the last time we briefed, we did mention that marking started on the 4th of January and is expected to terminate on the 22nd of January, which is Friday. And at this stage, when we have calculated, we've seen that at least 94.6% of the 45,272 markers that were appointed actually reported for marking. And out of that number, a total of 0.7% have tested positive, either on arrival or shortly after commencement. Now, you will agree, even from DG's introduction, that we carried out this marking against all odds. When we were planning, the country was already on alert level 1 from September, and we were hoping that we would go through marking under alert level 1. But unfortunately, things turned around and we had to mark against the backdrop of alert level 3 and the coronavirus cases increasing. But however, we continued, and 177 of our marking centers were in operation with over 45,000 markers, and all the health protocols were strictly observed. Our marking centers, our marking was conducted under very strict conditions as outlined in our protocol for marking. Safety of marking personnel was paramount. I think basically in everywhere you turned around in the marking center, the compliance officers were trying to make sure that people complied with the social distancing, with the wearing of masks, with the sanitizing, and all the protocols as outlined in our protocol for marking, which of course was developed from the directions and the regulations. And DBE did not leave it to chance. We went out there to monitor what was going on in provinces to ensure that the provinces were actually complying and that all marking centers were complying. The DG was out there. I'm not sure how many marking centers he did, but I have a feeling he did almost all the marking centers. So if he himself alone almost went to all the marking centers. But DBE sent out monitors as well, officials as well as privately appointed monitors to monitor processes across all marking centers. So we had our hands on the pulse to know exactly what was going on, to ensure that marking centers were run according to the protocols for safety and security, as well as the reliability of the marking. Now, without much ado, just to give you an update of the completion status across provinces. A number of our provinces have completed ahead of schedule, as the DG indicated. You would see there on the slide, for instance, like provinces like Gauteng, KZN, Limpopo already have concluded. They were scheduled, for instance, Gauteng was scheduled to complete on the 22nd, but it completed on the 18th already. KZN as well completed yesterday. Limpopo has completed. They're basically rounding and packing up as well. Northern Cape completed on the 16th. And the other provinces that I've indicated mostly completed. Most of the subjects have been done. You'll find there's just maybe 1 or 2 subjects that are still left to be completed, and they are rounding up. Most marking centers are rounding up today or tomorrow, but certainly by Friday you will not be finding anybody at the marking centers. The packing up would have been done and people would have gone. So we really at this point want to congratulate our markers and all those who have worked so tirelessly to make sure that this marking takes place. For us to have been able to mark and conclude the marking of the 2020 combined exams against the background of the COVID risk alert level 3, I think it is really something to be grateful for. And we are very pleased that at least we are going to be able to finalize our results and release results to our candidates. Here I just want to give you some other general information, statistics with regards to how things finally panned out. This is as of today, 45,272 markers appointed, out of which 2,463 withdrew. Now remember, these withdrawals are those who maybe declined, didn't want to come for one reason or another, or maybe got sick, or family members got sick, or for whatever reason could not accept the appointment and so did not show. Now, out of the 2,463 that declined, the provinces replaced 1,736. If you look at that, that's about 70% of those who declined were replaced. In some cases, the provinces did not feel that they needed to replace all the markers because in some cases, the scripts were less than expected, especially for the senior certificate candidates who may not have turned up. But if you go across all provinces, a number of the provinces like Free State and Limpopo replaced 100%, while other provinces replaced fewer. But in total, if you put the total number nationally, they replaced at least 70% of the markers. And With regards to the personnel that tested positive, we have included numbers, those who tested positive at the gate, as in the case of Eastern Cape, where it was mandatory to test before you get into the marking center, as well as the others who tested after they had got in. You would find that we are at 315 as of today, a total of 315 tested positive, but 168 tested positive at the gate, so they were not even allowed to enter the marking center. Now, if you look at Limpopo, we have 12 plus 25. The 25 did not really test positive, but they were close to somebody who had tested positive, and in some cases, they just came to the marking center, and after one day they felt, no, they're uncomfortable, they don't have the psychological strength to go through it, and decided they wanted to be released, and so they were released to go home. In the case of Northern Cape as well, the +4 there, the 6 tested positive, but the other +4 did not necessarily test positive. Same scenario as I had explained with regards to Limpopo. So this is how we have ended as of today. Now, DG already indicated, unfortunately, that we did have some fatalities, and you can see the numbers there. KZN3 in Gauteng, 1 marker died, and in Limpopo, 1 marker, in Western Cape, 1, and at the DBE centralized marking center as well, 1. Now, a number of these markers or these fatalities we are speaking about, most of these markers actually arrived the marking center already sick. Some of them arrived and the very next day they were sick, which meant they were incubating or they had the symptoms when they arrived. Unfortunately, all of these centers, there's none of them from the Eastern Cape, because that would have been picked up if it was mandatory. But unfortunately, it wasn't, and the very next day or so they showed symptoms, and of course the normal protocols took place. They were taken to hospital. Some of them showed symptoms and decided they wanted to go home and receive treatment from there, but unfortunately a week later or so there were reports to indicate that they had unfortunately passed on. And we send our condolences as well to the families and to all of us, because these are our colleagues, and we feel very bad about any fatality. Unfortunately, this has happened. But if you look at the total numbers of 312, which comes to 0.7% of the markers, we have said that the numbers that have tested positive are not alarmingly high, especially when you compare to what is going on with the rest of the country. For that, we are very grateful that our markers were able to adhere to all the protocols. In terms of the strictness of the protocols, there was nobody that was exempt. Even the DG himself, when he went to marking centers, he had to undergo the protocols. In fact, they were ready to show him the door if he doesn't. So they said, if you don't go through the protocols, you're not getting into our marking center. So there was no one who was a holy cow, and I think that has actually assisted in curbing the spread. To think that you had 45,000 plus markers over 177 venues, anybody would call that a super spreader. But to see what we are seeing today, I think we are very grateful for that report. Now, just to give you an indication of some of the processes that we're going to be going on with from now on, mark capturing. Mark capturing has actually started. This is a process that overlaps. It overlaps with the marking. So 3 or 4 days into the marking, once the scripts are ready and mark sheets are ready, the capturing begins. But the capturers were not left out from the briefing. The same protocols that the markers were put through, the same safety orientation procedures, the capturers were also put through. So before they started the capturing. Now, across our provinces, we have 34 capturing centers, and each of these centers is managed by a system administrator. 611 capturers have been appointed across the 9 provinces. Now, since the capturers were also put through the same procedures, there were 2 capturers in the Eastern Cape that tested positive at the gate, and therefore they also had to withdraw and could not be part of the process. You would note that we are actually calling the 2020 examinations a combined exam. And it's simply because we have 3 cohorts of candidates that have written this examination. We have the November 2020 candidates who were supposed to write the exam. That was their examination, the matric class of 2020. We have that group. Then we have the NSC 2020 June candidates, those candidates from 2019 who wanted to improve or complete their subjects in 2020 June exam, unfortunately couldn't write because the examinations had to be postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic at that stage. They also wrote. And then, of course, the senior certificate candidates who were also supposed to write in June, they also wrote the November exam. So basically, we had these 3 groups or categories of candidates who wrote this examination at the end of last year. Capturing is taking place currently, and the capturing process is a 3-phased process. There's always a double capture, what we call a double capture, meaning 2 people at least must capture every mark, and whatever they have captured for that particular candidate, for that particular subject, must tally. Without that verification, the marks cannot be transferred. So there's always the capturing, the verification, and before mark transfer can take place. Those are the steps that are put in place to ensure that the correct marks are captured against each candidate's each candidate for every subject. Now, this is just to give you an indication of the capture center status as of the 18th of January. You can see the different provinces, the number of capturers that were expected. As I said, 611 across the country. 60 capturers in the Free State, Eastern Cape 60, and the numbers go down like that. And then the number of withdrawals, there were 7 that withdrew, also for similar reasons as was the case of markers. And then in terms of capturers that tested positive, none has tested positive as of now, except for the 2 that tested positive at the gate at Eastern Cape and withdrew at the gate, so did not even take part in the capturing process. We got 34 capturing centers, and that is how they are spread across the country, 3 in the Free State, 8 in Eastern Cape, and the list goes down. Some provinces prefer to centralize their capturing all at one venue. I think sometimes the expanse of the province determines also whether they want to centralize or they want to spread it out into different points so that it makes the process faster. But these are the centers that we have, capturing centers across all provinces, and the number of capturing rooms. We also ensuring that there is social distancing and there are as few as 10 or 11 capturers in a room, just in case one tests positive. You don't have to close down the whole center. Now, in terms of the start and end dates, you can see there that most provinces started their capturing on the 11th. Which was around the 5th or 6th day of marking already. Some started on the 8th and everybody is expected to complete by the 25th. So by the 25th, which is Monday, all the capturing and all the marks should be on the system at that stage. Here we were just indicating the transfer percentage for the different cohorts, but this is already old data from 18 because 2 days, 1 day actually in marking system is a very long time because you got a 12-hour working day. So if you add yesterday's 12 hours plus the few hours we have spent here this morning, certainly these figures are, you can add another 30% to it. Now, so our teams are getting ready to finish up what they are doing at the marking center. There are a few that are still there, as I said, finalizing, but otherwise all the other teams are done. And the last time we made a presentation, we also indicated some of the challenges that we had. I'm bringing back some of them, I'm repeating some of them, but I'm just going to indicate how we dealt with those that came up. With regards to the shortage of markers, as I indicated to you, at least 70% of the markers were replaced. So that's 70% of the number that we drew were replaced. Now, if you add the number that were replaced to the markers, finally we actually marked with a cohort of approximately 98.6% of our markers. So we marked with almost a full complement. And even on other years before the COVID, normally not all the markers report at the marking center. Some of them also still withdraw. So for us to be able to mark with over 98% of our marking force this year, I think that that was really incredible, and we are eternally grateful for that. So most of the provinces did not even have to extend the marking days. They went on with the replacement, and in some cases, even where they didn't replace up to 100%, they were able to finish on time. With regards to the reliability and validity, the DBE on-site moderators have been out there quality assuring the marking and providing support to provinces where necessary. And in cases where the chief markers or internal moderators have tested positive, they have been replaced with able deputy chief markers who were experienced enough to take up those positions. Now, with capturers who also have tested positive, in the case of the Eastern Cape, we haven't heard of any replacements yet, but the numbers that they have are enough to do the work and to complete the capturing on time. The DG spoke about load shedding, which I think we have been not really affected by the load shedding during marking. Sometimes we begin our marking at 6 a.m. and end at 6 p.m. It's a 12-hour marking day, and you know that there's light up till 7 p.m. The sunshine is there, and we are in summer, and so it doesn't even get dark that quickly. So we were not really affected by load shedding during the marking, but during the capturing, yes, we do need electricity, and so 6 of our provinces do have backup generators. The 3 provinces that do not have backup generators, they don't have it at all centers, but they have it at some of their centers, but not all of their centers. But in the cases of the centers where they don't have backup generators, the plan is that they are capturing in line with the planned load shedding. So if, for example, there's going to be load shedding at 11, they can start their day. Instead of starting at 8, they can start at 6, and the 1-hour load shedding can be taken as a lunch time. So they're planning their days around that for those few centers, and they are very few. The others do have backup generators to deal with that. So the DG was there from the beginning to the end. You can see even during the finalization processes, where the boxes are now being packed in the control room, to proceed to capturing, to proceed to the depot and all of that. He was also there, checking out what is going on. You can see on the box is written done, 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 which means this one is over and it can now move. So we thank the DG as well for being there on the spot. So he doesn't just depend on reports that are provided to him. He goes on ground and sees for himself and provides support as much as possible. Now, just to give you very briefly our program with regards to the resulting and release, if you look at our chart there, marking is done. People are packing up. Marking centers, in fact, most marking centers have packed up. The last few will be packing up by today, tomorrow, and everybody will be out of there. Mark capture is in progress, and we are expecting it to be completed by the 25th. Then the pre-standardization processes have already begun. The DG has already started convening the pre-standardization meetings, but it's going to culminate with the one that will happen also on the 2nd of February with all heads of department meeting. And then, of course, we will make our presentation to Umalusi in terms of irregularities and how we have managed them. That would be on the 12th of February. And after Umalusi has made their pronouncement and they have approved the results, then we will now be able to release preliminary data to higher education by the 19th and final data to higher education by the 23rd. After the minister has released. The minister is due to release results on the 22nd of February, and this will be followed by provincial releases on the 23rd of February. And after that, we will open the system for remark and recheck. We allow learners, it's part of our regulations, that learners who are not happy with the marks that they have they have received, and they feel that they could have done better than was awarded to them, they are free to appeal. And we have an appeal process which we call a remark. You can apply for your script to be remarked, or you can just apply for it to be rechecked. And so that process is going to begin immediately after the results have been released. So it's been a long journey. but now you can see that the boxes are being packed up. It is very important that every script of every learner is accounted for. And throughout this chain, and it looks like there are thousands of people handling this, but it's done under very strict conditions and under very strict outlined protocols. And therefore, every script of every learner in every subject must be accounted for. We actually offered approximately 216 papers to be written, and the learners, each learner writes approximately 16 papers. And when you put the multiplicity of that together, for the over 1 million candidates, you can imagine the millions of scripts that we handle. But then it is important that every child's script or every learner's script is accounted for, and they get the marks that is due to them. And so I would like to conclude by saying that our examinations, the 2020 combined exams, was unprecedented. We know the circumstances under which those examinations took place, but we are happy that we were able to have those exams. The capacity of the system has been stretched. We are not living in some other planet. We are living in the same country and in the same world that is experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic. So against that background, yes, the capacity of the system was stretched, but I believe that the mettle of the system has been tested, because a system is as good as how it will react under difficult circumstances. So I thank you.
Thank you so much, DG. Thanks so much, Mrs. Ogubanjo. I'm going to use this opportunity to invite questions. I know there's about 2 or 3 questions. I'm not sure if there will be more later. I'm going to ask Heidi to go first, and then we'll go to the WhatsApp line to see if there's anything there. Heidi?
Okay, Heidi Jones from ENCA. I just want to ask if there are any possible concerns from Omalisi now that marking is almost done, following the leaking of those papers. And then I would also like to ask if the department has picked up any irregularities during the marking process, and if so, how many and in which provinces? Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. Can we check on the WhatsApp line if there's any question?
Thank you, Chair. On the WhatsApp line, I have received one question from Nazim. What will be the procedure and turnaround period for learners requesting a remark? That's a question for now.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm not sure who will attempt the questions first. DJ. All right. Great stuff. DJ.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mhlanga, and also thank you to Heidi for the 2 straightforward questions, and Nazim will attempt to respond to those questions. Let me start with the ones from ENCA, Heidi. Are there any concerns? There are no concerns at all. During our visits to each of the marking centers, one of the concerns are the ones that are covered by Ms. Ogubanjo. We came across marking rooms. You see, you've got a venue and you've got marking rooms. You'd have about 16 marking rooms where markers have been put in. The concerns that we have raised was marking that was taking place in the hall. There were just too many markers were put in a hall. The risk was just too high in case anything happens. And we raised those concerns on the spot with provincial officials, and we were accompanied by these provincial officials, and those concerns were immediately addressed. There was one concern around accommodation of markers in one of the schools in Limpopo, where markers were supposed to be accommodated an average of 2 markers in a room. We found that there were more than 2 in a room, and we raised it immediately with the authorities, and they attended to that. Irregularities, there are usual irregularities, normal irregularities, such as the registration of learners being full of errors, or learners having registered for the wrong papers, or learners who are supposed to write a particular paper, and in this time around, you'd find that there are learners who are registered to write papers that are written by part-time candidates who are supposed to have written in May, June. For instance, let me take accounting. Accounting for part-time candidates would be 1 paper. And then you'd find that some of the learners, either full-time or part-time, they pitch for the wrong paper. It's locked down as an irregularity because you need to investigate until you get to a point of getting all the facts, and then there will be a meeting where those irregularities would be presented. There are also irregularities which relate to maybe the delay occasioned by service delivery protests, and all of those are reported in a meeting that will be attending. If I'm not mistaken, from next week, those meetings will be convened by the exam line functions, and we will be attending to all of them. So Mrs. Okubanjo will expand on the irregularities. And then the issue of the leaked papers is also going to be dealt with as part of the irregularities. The meeting that deals with irregularities will consider a report from the task team appointed by the Director General, and then we'll look at the report that will be presented. You all know by now that the preliminary report was provided to us. It was even made part of the court papers. So the final report will be coming, because ever since then, there's been an extensive investigation, and the investigation will also go to the extent of saying, what is investigative marking picking up? Investigative marking is marking auditors who will, as they mark, they compare the performance of learners in, let me say, mathematics. The paper that leaked is paper 2. They would also be comparing how learners have performed in those 2 papers. They would also be comparing the performance of learners throughout the year, whether there's anything out of kilter which warrants attention. But given the fact that there are a myriad of variables that would come into play, I think at the end of it all, the report will reflect on all of those variables, and then recommend on what needs to be done. And then beyond that point, then the report, a comprehensive report, will be put together. Mrs. Okubanjo has indicated in the dates that she shared with us as to on which date are we going to meet with Umalusi to present a report on the irregularities. Sister Priscilla, do you want to add 1 or 2 questions? The one about particularly the turnaround time for remark. Please come.
Thank you, DG. In terms of the remark, the closing date would be the 28th of February for those applying online, and the 10th of March for those applying manually. So once results are released on the 22nd, people can start applying, and they can apply for remark up to the 10th of March. Now, the results for the remark should be out by the 13th of April. So from the time of application to the time of marking and checking and release of results. 13th of April is the date for the release of the remark results. I think DG already explained a lot about irregularities. At this stage, I think he has indicated most of what we would like to indicate, but usually know that in any examinations there are irregularities. There will be a few learners or candidates who would want to try and copy, sneak in crib notes or things like that. And normally you would also, the invigilators would have picked that up, and they would have inserted that information into the script of the learner for marking. But every learner script is marked irrespective of whether there was an irregularity or not. And therefore, during the marking process, yes, this will be picked up and will be dealt with accordingly. There's a whole list of processes and procedures that we follow in dealing with irregularities. But the important thing I think we need to know today is that as much as possible, we try to deal and finalize with these irregularities before the release of results, because we do not want candidates' results to be withheld unnecessarily. The only time you have results not being released on the release day, that means there are many more things to look for, and the irregularity possibly needs further investigation. But with regards to the Maths P2 that DG was talking about, DG has already established a national investigative task team, and the task team is using a multi-pronged approach to gather information with regards to dealing with this irregularity. And this information will be presented to Umalusi. At this stage, we cannot say whether Umalusi has concerns or what. They would say for themselves whether they have concerns. But we will present our irregularity report to Umalusi on the 12th of February. And after we have presented our report to Umalusi, they will be able to make a statement. I think on the 15th, Umalusi is having a press release. I don't have all the Umalusi dates, but you can speak to Umalusi, and I think they'll give you all of that information. In their report, they will now be able to indicate whether they have any issues. But we are preparing a report for Umalusi at this stage. I think that is where I'm going to leave it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DG and Ms. Ogubanjo. I'm told there are more questions on the WhatsApp. Before we come to you, Sisona, let's start with the WhatsApp and then we'll come to you. Please, let's go to the WhatsApp line. Thank you. All right. I'm sure the DG and Ms. Ogbanja got that. Sisona?
Just in addition, Sisona News 24, in addition to the question of about the marking centers that are yet to complete, is there any contingency plans if they don't finish on time?
Okay. All right, that's fine. Are there any more questions? Tell me if there are any more questions so we can determine if we need a third round or what. All right, that's fine. DG, please come handle the questions. And then I'm not sure if Ms. Ogbanja will also want to.
Yeah, sure.
Right. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, is it News 24 contingency plan in case they don't finish on time? They will finish on time. The cutoff date is the 22nd and centers are wrapping up. They will definitely finish on time. So there is no doubt about that. All centers will be done before the cutoff date of the 22nd. Number of scripts received, I'm sure Sister Priscilla, I don't have the figure of the exact number of scripts. Maybe she might have. If she doesn't, maybe that information can be made available later. So it's tons and tons of data. So she can provide that later. And then scripts of learners were implicated. Well, what usually happens, and I'm going to refer to history here, is that the scripts are marked like all other scripts. What happens is that if there is substantial evidence to suggest that learners were involved in wrongdoing, you block their results. The results are blocked until the investigation is finalized, as Mrs. Okubanjo has indicated, and maybe the decision later could say that the results are nullified based on the outcomes of the investigation. So the results will be blocked, but the scripts will be marked like all other scripts. I don't know whether I've responded to all of them, Mr. Mhlanga. That's what I've got from me. If there's anything that I've not covered, Ms. Okubanjo could cover. Is this mine?
Thank you, DG. I think DG actually has covered it. Yes, those candidates who are implicated with for the leaked paper, just like any other irregularity, even those who copied, their scripts will be marked. That's what we said. We always mark every candidate's scripts, and they will be called, if necessary for further investigation, they will be called to hearings. They will be called to be spoken to. We don't just unnecessarily withhold candidates' results. They'll be called for hearings, for further investigations, and depending on the outcome of the investigation, their results will be released. Now, the earlier we do this, the better. So it is important that candidates avail themselves when they are called to the department, so that the department can be able to interview them and get the necessary correct information from them and proceed with dealing with their irregularities. So all candidates across all provinces, not only for the leaked paper, anyone who has been involved in any kind of irregularity, they would certainly be given a fair chance and a fair hearing, and their scripts have already been marked with all the others. And when their scripts are being marked, they are not tagged, so that they're marked specially. No, they're marked like every other script, fairly with every other candidate, because the outcome of the investigation could be not guilty. And if it's guilty, of course, the results will be nullified, and the learners will be given another chance to write, or it will follow accordingly, because the different types of irregularities have different types of sanctions. And that I don't think I can explain at this time. There are very many of them, but they will be dealt with accordingly in terms of the regulations. I think all the others, DG already covered. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks DG, thanks Ms. Okubanjo. I think we are done, colleagues. If there are any questions that you might have, we can continue to engage. The DG will remain available for interviews. I know there are other people who have already requested DG for one-on-one engagements later. But I think for today, we will conclude it here. Let me thank everyone who has asked questions via the WhatsApp line, as well as the colleagues who have taken the trouble to come to this place. We continue to respect social distancing, and I think it will remain the same. DG, do you?
Just 1 point.
Okay, DG has one more point to make before we go.
Sorry, Mr. Mhlanga, for interrupting your wrap-up of this important engagement. The number of scripts, 9.5 million scripts, which were received, which got marked in the 177 marking centers by 45,000 markers. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the teacher unions. Teacher unions are always known as being disruptive and obstropolous. Most of the time, they've been extremely constructive. We've been meeting with them every Saturday, presenting a report of every week. They would look at the report, make inputs, give advice, and even in the centers that I visited, I met with them, playing a very constructive role, supporting the management of the centers. And the South African Democratic Teachers Union in particular, we came across them in these centers that we visited, and they played a very constructive role. The same applies to the Association of School Governing Bodies, the professional bodies such as SAPA, the South African Principal Association, DIPASA, an association of school principals of learners of schools with special education needs. They played a very important role in this process and have really been our sounding board every step of the way. And if there's any success that we have made, we share the spoils. They've contributed immensely to this project. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues. We're done. There's nothing more to say. Thank you.
Thank you for a nice briefing, which is easy, without stress, no sweat.
No, presentation is good on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Hey, can see you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And it smells very nice.
How are you today?
Fine, John.
I'm good, thank you.
Great.
Really PSA with the DGN as well.
Let's do it. DJ, that's government radio there.
Government?
Radio.
Oh, government radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, government radio.
Or maybe we can start with you seeing that.
Yeah, you can start.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Smells nice. It's sanitized. I'm going for it after.
It's easy.
Very easy.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like a deodorant.
Oh, you're still preparing? I know that it is ready. Let's start here. Just basically the summary of what we're here for today.
Well, a huge sigh of relief. The biggest marking project that we delivered this year. We've seen its delivery done immaculately by the 9 provinces. So all marking centers are actually done with marking. And what is happening is just the wrapping up, taking the scripts, getting trucks to collect them. It's been a very challenging marking session.